a poll, if you wish to call it referendum, but not a referendum as visualized in our constitution, a poll. The voters of the eastern province decide whether to continue the joinder or not. This is rather different from the previous attempts at joinder. I'm mentioning this because when an attempt was made to join the northern eastern province earlier, as a member of the United National Party, I opposed it because that was a permanent joinder. But I've not been against the eastern province if they are to join the northern province, either deciding before the joinder or after the joinder by a universal franchise vote to decide whichever way they wish. That is a controversial item in the agreement. But my government intends to go ahead with the creation of the provinces, with the province for the north and east joined together, as I said, temporarily, until, if I may use the word, referendum, eastern province decides what it should do. The rest of the agreement is a reiteration of what we have been talking earlier. We have been talking now since 1983 particularly, but since freedom, how we could help those living in the northern eastern provinces, Tamil-speaking people, how we could help them to have a share in the central government of this country, which they are entitled to do. Their fear was that under universal franchise, the other provinces would dominate the central legislature, which was a legitimate fear. Once the single-only bill was passed, they began to fear that they had no place in the central legislature and they should therefore seek autonomy in the periphery, in the northern and the eastern province. And a federal party was formed, which later developed into an independent state called Ceylon. When my government came to office in 1977, we tried to implement our manifesto, and the problems facing the Tamil-speaking people with regard to admission to universities, with regard to education, with regard to settlement in the colonization schemes, with regard to managing their own affairs through district councils, and with regard to language, should be settled, and we attempted to do so. But a body of youth had grown up, particularly in the Jaffna Peninsula, who were adopting violent methods of achieving their goals. The first violent act was the murder of the mayor of Jaffna, a Tamil, Mr. Duriyappa, who was a member of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, a member of parliament. He was murdered in cold blood at the Nalur temple in 1976, and this was done by Prabhakaran, who was a youth of 18 at that time. You know the history since then. Up to 1983, though there was violence, sporadic violence in the north and the east, we were able to travel about in those areas. I had a presidential election in 1982, October. I had a referendum the same month, 1982. We campaigned in the north and the east without fear. But in 1983, July, 13 soldiers were killed by a bomb in Jaffna, and riots broke out throughout the southern parts of the island. That was the beginning of what became ultimately a minor war. The government, my government, had then been 6 years in office. We had opened up the whole economy. We had started development plans on a large scale never attempted before. We had massive aid from foreign countries, and there was a new look among the people. But since 1983, much of the money which we devoted for development had to be channeled for other purposes, for violent purposes, for the training of troops, for the enrollment of bigger and bigger armies, for the buying of ships and planes and ammunition, if I may use the word, for war purposes, which was never my intention when I became Prime Minister and President. As a matter of fact, I thought I could reduce the armed services. I thought I could follow the example of Costa Rica, through which country I came after the Cuban non-aligned movement, where they had only the police, and the police were given certain military training to help them to quell riots. I thought that should be our object, because I am, by birth, by training, by education, and by my own conviction, a non-violent man. I am not for violence in any way, except as head of government and state. You have to use violence to protect your country and its people. But personally, I am not for violence in any form or manner. That was the idea I wished my government to follow, and we were doing that. But when this terrorist activity was upon us, burst open upon us in 1983, till July 1987, for 4 years, we had to follow a violent course. Whether we could have militarily suppressed the terrorists with help coming to them from India across the Pork Strait, which we're trying our best to stop, with the expenditure of large sums of money. Whether we could have got the help of India not to train the terrorists, not to give them arms, not to give them money. Whether we could have been able to face a minor war in the north and the east and continue our development program is difficult to say. But I know that other countries too have appealed when they were in distress to foreign powers. India, when China attacked her in the 1960s, asked for the help of the United States of America. I've cited this to Rajiv Gandhi and to his High Commissioner. The Americans sent their big bombers, and New Delhi almost sank under the weight of the American bombers. They came to Madras. At that time, the Soviet Union was with China, and India had to go to help from America, which they got in unlimited quantity. And for 2 years, an American military mission was in India. If India had to go for help, a foreign country, why should not a small dot like Sri Lanka go to help to a friendly power? The Great Britain, in the Second World War and in the First World War, particularly in the Second World War, when Germany had come to the shores of the British Channel, pleaded with Roosevelt for help. He got it. The American planes are still in the United Kingdom. So this is a common thing in the world. From 1983, the Indian government, central government,